Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Toby Demker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast. We have a discussion between the two of us, usually a topic we choose in advance, and we just kind of see where the discussion takes us. So we usually cover things from personal development, professional development, organizational change, and even a bit of philosophy. So, Toby, I thought this time maybe the way we could start it is a lot of times after we finish one of these, it keeps working in my head, and I usually have a lot of afterthoughts. So I
Yeah.
thought I'd check in with you and see. Last time we talked about learning. Any afterthoughts there? Anything that you wish you would have thrown in there, or anything that kept percolating after we had our chat?
Well, now you mention it, maybe just that, the importance of reflecting on learning, how much of it, and depending on your preferences, of course. I mean, I'm an introvert, so I really learn a lot from processing it afterwards and having some time to reflect on what it really means to me, etc. So that's a really important point. That you don't learn everything on the spot. For a lot of people like me, the learning comes afterwards, and after
Hmm.
we have the conversation or the experience or whatever. So that's a really big one for me.
Yeah.
And personally, I was thinking. I mean, there's always a personal takeaway from our conversations, I think, and one of them for me is that I can really challenge myself a lot more when it comes to learning and curiosity. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I do to learn, but specific certain topics or certain stuff that I could be a bit more patient with and stick with a little bit more to challenge myself and learn a bit more. I think my learning curve would improve, so to say. So yeah, that's I can still challenge myself a lot. That's a big takeaway. Yeah.
So it's kind of the more you learn, the more you realize you have to learn.
Well, yeah. I mean, for a lot of stuff, it is like that.
Yeah, it is for me.
But also just new stuff. I mean, there's certain topics. Let's say, I mean, software stuff. I'm not really good at that kind of. Well, I'm not patient with it, so I need to stick with it and make it fun. Because there are ways, and there's a lot of YouTube channels and different ways to learn about it that makes it fun. And when you have a little bit of a progress, then it becomes more fun, right? So it's just really sticking with it and just doing it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I was thinking about why learning is so important to me because learning had a different connotation. When I was a kid, I didn't love school. I wasn't great at school. I was good
mm,
at the things that interested me, and everything else I just kind of got by.
mm.
Um,
Same here. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
So and I was thinking about what has created this desire to learn as I got older, because certainly in my 30s I'm way more interested in learning than I was even in my 20s. So I think that it was a shift in mindset, for sure, for me, and just finding myself being curious about a lot of things, like the personal development stuff that I've been looking at for the last 25 years. So I think that, and I think what really makes learning important is because it's part of my life philosophy. Is my purpose in life is really about growth, right, and
mm,
continuing to grow always. And learning is a huge component of that. Learning and experience and just becoming more than I was yesterday. So yeah, I think that's why the learning topic's important, and I think that's why I enjoy doing these chats with you, because you know I, I learn something every time. I think
mm,
even just talking about things, and then I realize, oh, actually, I thought I knew a lot about this topic, and trying, if you can't break it down to its simplest, if you can't explain it in a simple way, then you probably
mm.
don't understand it that well. And
Yeah.
it just reminds me sometimes what I still have to learn. So
Mm,
anyway, so
yeah.
those were my afterthoughts.
Yeah. And maybe one more thing
Mm-hmm.
that just came to because I'm preparing for some work training that I have to do, and it's about a topic that I know a little bit about, but I know exactly what you're saying. I need to make it more understandable for myself to be able to explain it to others. And it's really about thinking hard about examples and stories and linking it together so that, I mean, storytelling becomes a part of it there. But it's really, I'm really liking what you're saying, then breaking it down to its simplest components so you can explain it with simplicity and just, make it really easy to grasp. That's a great process of learning for me as well. And it's just, if and it's really, I found myself yesterday doing it, and I'm just staring into the blue, but thinking really, really, really hard. So I'm one of those thinkers, I guess.
Yeah,
I just need
I,
to,
I've
think.
heard that attributed to Einstein. I think he said that if you, but everything's attributed to some quote from him. But yeah, if you can't break it down, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't really understand it or something like that. But anyway, okay. Well, look, let's jump into our next topic. I wanted to talk about something that that's probably one of the core reasons people come for coaching, and that is creating change. So I'd really like to have a conversation today about how to create change. Whether I know from your side, from a leadership and organizational standpoint, for me, I'm really passionate about helping people create change in their individual lives and their professional lives.
Mm.
Obviously, also within organizations as well. But I think there's the one constant in life is change, as they say, but often we don't know how to facilitate it or get it started or get it going in the direction that we want it to. So yeah, that's where I'd like to start today.
So when you're talking about creating change, you're talking about it from a really proactive stance, right? That this is something that, not something that you have to deal with. It's something that you actually have to create, and yeah, apply, implement, and try to sustain, right?
Yeah, because I know we some episodes ago we did dealing with change because there's it's been a lot of things happening, but this is more along the lines of how do we there are things we want or there are things that we don't want anymore. How do we create that change?
Mm. Okay. Mm.
So I think a lot of people look externally. They're always looking to make, well, ultimately they're looking to have different results than they're getting in their
Mm.
life. And I think the place I want to start is, it's an inside job. It always starts within the external. I think Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And
Mm.
I think that kind of reflects on, if you don't make those internal changes in the way you view the world, in your mental processes, in your behaviors, or the things that trigger your behaviors, you're not going to see the change that you want to see in your results or in the external world. So I think that's maybe where I want to start today is, the way to affect change in your life is to look within and see the things that you need or want to change internally in order to get those changes externally.
Mm. Yeah, sure. I mean, the first episode we did was about purpose, and that's where I go, per sort of per on auto. Just, why? Why do you want to change? What do you want to achieve? Why is this important for you?
Hmm.
And I guess that's looking inside, why is this so important to you? And of course, that can be aligning to your life philosophy or your own values or whatever, but just really understanding why is this important to me? What's the purpose? And from a coaching point of view, I mean, the starting point would also be like, yeah, what do you want to achieve with this? What is going to look like in the long term? What's the benefits, etc. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
So for
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so I mean, for me, that would be, or that's, yeah, just per ultimate auto where I go first. Yeah.
I agree. I think for me, whether it's in business, whether I'm coaching a CEO or someone at a higher level management, we talk a lot about vision and where you're trying to take things through the bigger picture, but also people on an individual level. It's what's the vision for your future? Where are you trying to get to? And maybe it's a very specific goal, and people have find there's barriers, and or sometimes it's just a more general, bit more well-being, better relationships, things like that. And so I agree with you. I think having sort of a direction. I usually, tell my clients that, it's, you wouldn't get into a boat and sail off randomly, and people usually chart a course. It's this,
Yeah.
it's, and so, and just because you've charted that course doesn't mean you can't change tact on the way. You can decide on the way to have a different destination, because you'll learn and grow on the way, right?
Yeah.
The happiness is, or it's not the destination, it's the path. I was reaching for a quote that wasn't coming to me, but it is the journey. The journey it's all about the journey. And so but it's hard to have a journey unless you know where you're trying. It's trying to take you, right? So I think having some sort of a vision, being clear about where you want to go, getting clear about what you want is a really good one. It helps with your motivation for sure. And then if you see where you want to be and where you are now, you can see the contrast between those, and then you can start to look at the next thing, which is, okay, what's standing in my way, right? I mean, you can very simply, the sort of the grow coaching model that I sometimes teach to, or I explain to managers when they want to, or leaders who want to coach people in their teams. First of all, you get the goal. And then you look at what's the obstacle, what's standing in the way. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Having a goal, knowing where you want to go, having some kind of a vision for yourself. I think I do an exercise every year at the end of the year. For me, it's, the end of the calendar years, even though it's this man-made concept, it's the Gregorian calendar is. It's the one we use, but it's also, for me, it marks a new year and a new 12 months to set some new goals, to have a new vision. Yeah. So actually, I think about the things that I want, and I create a vision board for myself, something that I can look at, and I actually end up putting it on my phone, a little collage of photos that represent something to me. And it's a vision for this coming year, the things that I want to create in my life. And that helps me internalize it. So I think internalizing the things that you want for yourself is a really important first step, getting really, really, really clear on that. And then you can go from there. I also work with people on, one of the things that there's three fundamental questions that I look at in coaching, especially in personal coaching. And the second two are the ones people often come to me for. And so people will either already know what they want and they'll go, how do I get it? Here's what I'm striving for. Can you help me reach my goal? Then there are people who are looking for clarity. It's like, what do I want, right? So what do I want? How do I get it? Those are two very common questions that people come for coaching. But the one they often overlook is this question of, who am I, right? And the reason that's important is because people, especially our age, think, well, I already know, I know who I am, right? And they've created this identity for themselves, but they don't understand themselves from a deeper level, from a systemic level, all the different elements that are drawing at you, the different levels you can see yourself from. Because when you understand yourself better, you'll understand your desires better. So systemically speaking, we can talk about the inner child, or the inner critic, or these different levels of our personality that we've developed throughout our lives. And I think that when you're asking yourself, when you're asking yourself, what do you want? You can also ask yourself, well, who wants that? Is this something that that I'm aspiring to because of some family, some relationship with one of my parents, or there are all these different things that will drive our they'll push us to success. They'll create certain habits. We create certain standards from ourselves because of either expectations that have developed from what we've experienced so far. So I find what do I want is tied to who I think I am. This,
Yeah.
who do I am this, I'm who I am professionally will maybe create expectations of, well, I should want these things. I should, and if you can eliminate a lot of these shoulds, and even sometimes people come to me for coaching and they'll go, I've I've gone to university. I've got a partner, or maybe they don't, or maybe they even have family and kids, and they have reached a certain career in their life, a point in their career, and then they come to me and go, but something feels missing. I don't feel happy. They've ticked all these boxes, but they weren't. Those boxes, that list of things they've ticked off didn't come from an authentic place. It was sort of socially conditioned, and so now they're reflecting on their values and recognizing that a lot of their choices weren't driven by their core values. And so that's why for me, this whole, I think you're right about figuring out what you want. And I hadn't expected to go in this direction actually, but this whole understanding yourself better and so on is really, well, obviously to the topic, figuring out how to create changes, and understanding yourself is important, but also understanding why you want the things that you want, right? So yeah, and going back to that original question for purpose, finding your why. So I think those are all important components, and sorry, I didn't want to dominate the conversation, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, sure. No, when you're talking about this, I'm also thinking, how do we define change? Because one thing that we might be talking about now is, how tied to all the other topics that we've had, about learning and curiosity and values and stuff, but it's kind of self-development. How do we add to our palette? But change, that's something that we want differently from. It's not what we want more. It's something that we want to do differently. Maybe we're going down the wrong path, or whatever it is. And to drive that from the driver's seat, so it's not something that is influenced from the outside, that, oh, I have to change, but it's something that I want to do differently, because of certain different circumstances. That's I don't know. It's a bit challenging. What drives that change, if it's from an internal point of view? So yeah, maybe we could dig into that a little bit.
What
Yeah.
drives that change is, well, that there's a desire to have a different outcome, right?
Yeah.
Or there is, you recognize, this is where I am now, and actually it's not where I expected to be, or I wanted to be somewhere very different. It's easy to get off track in life, right? Or in business, it's easy to get off track. You you have a lot of automated processes, or you get so in the weeds, in the minutia of what's going on day to day, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, we're way off track. That's why you measure results regularly and you do performance reviews, but also in people's personal lives, I recommend that, you reflect on regularly on, what am I actually trying to achieve in my life and where I'm going, or for this year, I had these visions for myself for this year, and how far am I, and every couple of months taking some time to reflect on, where how far you've gotten and where you actually wanted to go. So I think, excuse me, the knowing where you want to go and recognizing where you are along that way is important. But I think that's what drives our desire for change, knowing that you want something more for yourself. You want, where you are now, you're not satisfied with, or sometimes it's just, okay, I've had enough of this. It's time for something new. To our point about learning, I'm not learning anymore. I think when you get to a point, there's always more to learn. But when you get to a point where you're starting to feel like you stagnate, I think then you feel like you want to make a change that's going to challenge you more, that's going to teach you new things, that's going to give you new life experiences. I think all of those things are factors in wanting change. And then in organizations, how can we be more successful? How can we be more equitable? How can we be more environment, considerate of the environment? Or how can we have a more of an impact on society, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, what we're talking about is really proactive driving change to create some kind of development or sustainability or more. I mean, creating a better outcome, basically, right? Mm.
Yeah, absolutely,
Mm. Mm.
absolutely. Actually, I was thinking about when I was thinking about this topic. One of the guys I followed a lot over the years is Joe Dispenza, and he talks about creating your day every day. So
Mm.
he refuses to get out of bed until he has a clear vision of what he wants for his day, and he teaches that, and he encourages people to do that,
Mm.
and he does it in a scientific way. They actually test people to see how their neurophysiology changes as they change the way they see the world and the way as they visualize sort of their future.
Mm.
So I think that's done on a very daily basis. I think it's hard. It's certainly hard for me, and I think it's hard for others to try and be so ultra focused every day on what they want. Obviously,
Mm.
the most successful people do that, and I encourage that. I admit I don't do that on a daily basis,
Yeah.
but I kind of wake up and looking at, well, what do I need today? What do I
Mm.
need for what's the and having a morning routine is really important. Getting up.
Yeah. Exactly.
I got up this morning. I did some yoga and meditation, and I know that always puts me, gets me off to a good start in my day. So yeah. but I tend to get up in the morning, not just jumping into, okay, what do I got to get done today? I think that is actually a mistake.
Mm.
But if you wake up and going, what do I need right now to have a good start to my day?
Mm.
I think is really important.
Mm. Yeah, something that I don't know where it came from, but I've tried that. I mean, as you say, not on a daily basis, but from time to time, I think of a theme that I want to nurture during this day, and it can be. I mean, today I'm gonna be, extra good at listening, or today I'm just gonna focus on, being kind, or whatever it is. Just but choosing different kind of themes from day to day. That I find that interesting, and it it's never 100% that you just think about that one thing, but when you tap into it once in a while, it sets a kind of rhythm or atmosphere for the day, and I really like that. Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. So I guess where we've started with is, knowing what you want. So creating that vision for yourself is important. And I think the
Mm.
other footnote that I'd add to that is, when we're looking for what we want, and even when we're looking at observing the change we're trying to achieve, we look very externally. We're very external focused. These are the results I want. I want to, and for people's personal lives, I want to find a partner. I want a better relationship. I want to have more friends. I want to have more success, more financial success. I want to have a greater impact. They're looking very externally. And I
Mm.
think as you look at the things that you want, look at what does that mean for you internally, right? I think the things that both, the things that anchor our memories, our emotions, things that anchor the experiences we have that stay with us are all bound by emotion. Is this very powerful way to anchor things within us. And so, it's important as you're creating a vision for yourself for the future, or you're setting goals for yourself, I think there needs to be an emotional component. If you want to find the drive and motivation to get you there every day, I
Mm.
think you need to make sure that there is something emotional about your connection to that goal you've set for yourself, and rather than just, well, I want to earn more money, and I think having those things clear for yourself. And we talked in the past about authenticity.
Yeah.
You can be very career oriented and very financial success oriented, but if there isn't an emotional component to the things you're trying to achieve in your life,
Mm.
I get enough people that come to me who have had a lot of success that then don't feel fulfilled in other areas. So
Mm.
I'd say I'd add that. So with all these external things that you're looking to achieve, make sure you're also looking at the internal component, because that's where I want to go next in terms of how to create the change. It
Mm.
starts from within, but just to begin with, to make sure that there is a connection between these results externally that you want to have, the new directions that you want to go, and that there's some kind of an emotional, real visceral connection to those things within you.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I mean, all those questions that we very often overlook, I think, when it comes to emotions. We don't want to talk about emotions, right? It's cheesy. But, how do you actually feel about something now? And then tied to what we talked about before, that vision or that goal. So when you achieve this, what's that going to feel like? What's going to be different? And trying to tapping into these emotions, I think that's crucial actually, because as you say, it can be, yeah, I want to have a new car because I'm gonna be perceived as more successful or whatever. But if you don't understand what's driving that need, or that the emotional driver for that, then you're not really gonna understand what's important. And probably it's not that material thing, right? It's something else driving that need.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's super important to have the guts to tap into those feelings and emotions and those cheesy topics that so many people don't want to talk about.
But that's why I come back to that, why do I want it, right? So when we look at, well, I want to have that, I'd really like that new car, or I'd like to go on that great vacation, and those are legitimate. I'm not disputing why, don't want to have nice things. Everyone's
Mm,
allowed to want what they want.
mm,
But when you have people that are just on autopilot, well, I got to have the latest shoes and the latest, and if I have, the women go crazy for that handbag, and it's like, okay, what is, this, I think we recognize that we live in a consumer society, and
mm,
you can debate whether that's healthy or not. I question whether extreme consumerism is healthy for us, but
mm,
but I think questioning, the the reason that this is so important to you, right? Because
mm,
sometimes people go from goal to goal to goal. They achieve it. They don't take even a moment to celebrate or to go, okay, well, it just kind of, okay, now on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And
mm.
so I think if you're setting goals that you can't really celebrate, that don't really excite you when you've achieved them, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And also one thing that just struck me, that like maybe this lies really close to my life philosophy or whatever, but for me it's very much about balance. That's a key thing for me. And a few years ago I came across this dad who had this philosophy: I'm going to work like really hard now for the next 10 years, and then I'm going to retire early, and then I'm going to have time to spend with my kids, and etc., etc. And I just asked him, well, so in 10 years, how old are your kids going to be? Well, 15, 16. And it was, well, how much do you think they're going to be wanting to spend time with you then, if you haven't spent any time with them now? It's like, yeah,
Mm.
okay, yeah, maybe not. And the same thing yesterday. I read an article about this new, I don't know if it's a movement or something, but a lot of younger people, their philosophy is to retire early, so say at 40, 45.
Mm.
So work really, really hard, save as much as you possibly can, and invest as much money as you can, so you can retire early and live off interest, which is highly unpredictable anyway.
Mm.
But for me, I mean, I'm not going to judge anything and say what's right or wrong here. For me, it doesn't fit at all with this. As I said, I'm about balance. I want to have a sustainable kind of life philosophy and enjoy what I'm doing now, but also doing it later. So what I'm saying is, when you're talking about change and thinking about the purpose and the vision, if that's having a too big of an impact on your current situation, then I mean, really question that. Is that a healthy balance? Because to suffer for something that you want to have in the future, which is highly unpredictable anyway, I mean, I think that's really worth thinking about, if I'm putting it mildly.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't want to put in too much of my own, judgments and thinking here. So yeah.
No, I think people need to remember it's the journey, right? Are you, it's not that you need to enjoy every step. There are things that are hard,
Mm,
and I enjoy them sometimes because they're hard. Because I know what you maybe not in that moment, but you think about you like fitness. Sometimes there are workouts you're not going to love. Sometimes when I train for basketball, it's grueling.
mm,
But the way you feel after, you're happy with the results. So the enjoying the journey, but knowing that it's not going to be there's going to be their ups and downs. So I'm not
mm,
saying everything's got to be just fun and just taking everything very easy. But I do think you need to enjoy the process
mm,
in order to make it work well. So you can enjoy things that are hard. You can enjoy things that are difficult and challenging. And I find,
mm,
I always go back to the whole getting into the flow state. It needs to
mm,
be challenging in order to get into that state.
mm,
But I agree, if it's always just hard and there aren't any wins, there aren't any small things that you can celebrate. There aren't you're not balanced off with other things that are important, because if you're so ultra focused on one goal, you're going to
mm,
sacrifice a lot of other things.
mm,
And some people are aware of that and they're willing to do it. And we need those people in life, right? But I'm with you. I think having balance is really important.
mm.
Otherwise, you sacrifice. I think if you're going to be that focused, it's important to be aware of the things you're sacrificing. Really aware of them,
Yeah,
like you said
yeah.
with the guy that you made aware that well, you're sacrificing those moments with your kids as they grow up, and then do you think they're still going to want to be, if you haven't invested that time as they were kids developing, nurturing the relationship, do you really think they're going to want to spend a lot of time with you at 15, 16, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. And also, I'm thinking when you mentioned that about, creating kind of quick wins and tying back to a little bit of theory. I mean, maybe we talked about Cotter's model of instigating change before, but there's a lot of the things that he's talking about we're kind of touching upon. I just realized that, with first, I think the first thing is creating a sense of urgency, and then it's, creating momentum for the change. I mean, now we're talking about organizational change, right?
Yeah,
But getting people on board, getting people excited about it, and a feeling that we need to change and what it's about, and then establishing some kind of team that can promote the change and make sure that we're tracking it and pushing things forward. But then later on, it's like creating that vision. What do we want to achieve, so that becomes clear for everybody. But also later on, creating these wins that, when we're making progress, to really highlight that, this is working, because that's a great motivator as well. And we've just been talking about personal change, but maybe that's applicable there as well, to for us to realize that, we're making progress, and we're getting there to where we want to be. But then the final stage of his tool or his model is about making it stick, right? Creating that
yeah,
sustainable change. And even if you translate that to an individual change, that is a real challenge, right? that,
absolutely.
to make it sustainable, to make it stick. 'Cause we talked about before how easy it is to get on the wrong track, and then we want to get onto the right track. But how do we stick there? It might be possible that I'm going to go vegetarian, and let's just use that as an example. And okay, we start with a month, and then 2 months later, you're back at eating steaks every dinner or whatever. I don't know, but the challenge is to make it stick. It's so easy for us to fall back into our earlier patterns or habits, right? So.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the thing about my reference to there are going to be challenges and so on. We live now in such a convenience oriented society that a lot of people don't want to do the work. They don't want, like, think about we're living in a time where health is really important, because there are there's this virus going around, and so people want the pill, they want the shot, they want the easy solution, but they're you know. Think about people want to be healthy, so they just give me the pill, or they get sick and they want a solution, and they just give me the treatment or whatever so I can get back to whatever's normal. And the thing is, change isn't always easy, and certainly lasting change, it won't be there if you're only treating symptoms, right? If you're only making superficial change, it won't last. And so a lot of people do want change to be easy, and I think that gets now into talking about the kind of obstacles to change, and I think one of the biggest obstacles to change is that we this I look at it as psychological homeostasis. As biological organisms, they try and maintain this equilibrium. So change is danger, change is, there's risk in change, and I think emotionally and mentally, we also, that's why people, the biggest barrier to change is comfort. We don't like getting uncomfortable, right? Yeah. And so that's why we talk about the comfort zone. And so, and I think that is the biggest thing. So I think that's part of why people want change to be easy, because it's more comfortable, right? They don't have to challenge themselves too much, but that stays at a very superficial level, and then you won't have lasting change.
And that really, this we've talked about before, I know, but so if any listeners think that we're repeating ourselves, please forgive us. But we talked about the immunity to change, and even talking about Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, with our different systems that we have. One system that we can call the elephant, that is really driving everything, and then the other system that is our rational brain, that think that we can achieve these changes very, very easily, but our intuitive system is kind of pulling us back to our old habits. So finding that, going back to this part about immunity to change, finding the underlying drivers for our behaviors, and that can be patterns of thinking or big assumptions or whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to repeat that whole theory, but it's really something there to go deep. We talked about the emotional connection before, and challenging our assumptions and perspectives on things, and really finding the core of what we want to change. So we're not treating the systems. And it's like Western and Chinese medicine, like in Chinese medicine, it's very much about finding the core of the problem. If it's your rhythm of sleep, or if it's your even nutritious habits, or whatever it is. In Chinese medicine, it's a lot about drinking enough hot water. But it's definitely not like, oh, I have a cold, take some cold medicine, and treating your runny nose or something. I mean, that's not the way to go for them.
I think it's interesting that you made the elephant reference, because that also comes up in Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis, and he talks about the elephant and the rider, and the elephant being sort of the unconscious, and the rider being sort of your rational conscious mind, where you're trying to make decisions, and then you've got the elephant wanting to steer you in different ways, and you've got to. So super book. If anyone hasn't read it, it's I found it super enlightening. So I think recognize that goes back to the whole idea of knowing yourself, right, and understanding what's at play and where some of your desires are coming from. So shifting gears into, so we've talked a little bit about, okay, what's the important first thing. Having a goal, having a vision, knowing what you want, knowing why you want it. And then we've talked a little bit about some of the obstacles, the comfort zone. And I think some of the other obstacles that I wanted to bring up, I think for me, when I work with people on coaching, I look at, there's 4 areas I kind of look at. So beliefs, I have a really part of my approach to coaching is understanding what someone's personal philosophy is, and making sure the beliefs that they have within that philosophy are supporting them rather than staying in their way. And a lot of our beliefs do become a barrier. Mindset is also really important, having that growth
Mm.
mindset versus that fixed mindset. So you're not,
Yeah.
you're not believing that you just can't do things, or, that often stands in our way. And then the other thing is our behaviors. Our behaviors
Mm.
will get in our way because they're habituated, so they're automated. And we one of the first things when you set out to do something, like if someone's going to run a marathon or do things like triathlon, Ironman kind of things, the first thing you need to do is develop a set of behaviors that are going to help you reach that goal, right? I mean,
Mm.
it's if you don't have the right habits, you're never going to be able, in terms of training and nutrition and everything else. So the behaviors need to be there. And then the final thing, and I think this also probably comes in. I've never run a marathon, but I've talked to people who are long distance runners talk about, the biggest obstacle at some point is no longer your body, it's your mind,
Mhm.
and overcoming that. I can't, I don't want to go any
Mm.
further. So those are the four areas that I look at, the beliefs, the mindset, the behavior, and the thinking, because thinking is also a lot of habit. And if you have a lot of, if your inner critic is very strong and well developed, as it is in me,
Mm.
or you just have all these kind of repetitive thoughts that maybe you heard as a child or whatever, these things are going to get in the way of the change that you want to make. So
Mm.
those are the areas that I look at in terms of obstacles. Any other obstacles that you can think of that typically come up when you're looking for change?
I mean, it taps into everything that you've been saying. What struck me is that this part about the mindset, that our mind is the minds are creating the obstacles for us. So really, I mean, through developmental questions, through open questions, coaching like kind of questions, thinking about, for instance, in a change, it's hard, but what are the opportunities? What's the possibilities to create here? And just thriving that growth mindset, or that whatever mindset you want to call it, that is making you focus on the opportunities and that can drive you forward rather than being pulled back into your backtracks.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, no, I just echo what you just said there. I mean, but yeah, obstacles, mindsets, thinking patterns, yeah, those are really important drivers for change, for sure.
Yeah, and I think just going back to Joe Dispenza, he talks
Mm.
about. Yeah, I read his book, "Changing the Habit of Being Yourself," because we practice who we are on an emotional level and on a thinking level. We and through our behaviors, when people talk about who they are, their identity. It's based around certain behaviors that they have a lot of times. Well, that's just who I am, right? And
Mm.
that alone is a fixed mindset. That's just who I am. That's the way I was
Yeah.
born, right? I can't change. So that's an important one. So with that, I'd really like to shift over into some practical. Okay, now how do we facilitate change, both
Mm.
for individuals and on an organizational level? And there's two people that I really want to refer to as we're talking about this. One, the longtime master coach motivator, Tony Robbins from
Mhm.
the U.S.
Mm.
He does these very intense, like 3-day workshops and stuff like that, but he uses a lot of NLP. But
Mm.
one of the specific methods that he uses to change is a neuroassociative conditioning. And so I just wanted to run quickly. I want to talk about him, and I want to talk about BJ Fogg, because I'm
Mm.
fascinated with the very simple model that he's come up with that I think is genius.
Okay.
But just to run through the kind of steps, I've made a few notes, because it's one thing to take someone through the process, but I know talking about it, just like when we talked about the 4 agreements, I couldn't, even though I think about them often, I'm
Yeah.
always drawing a blank.
Mm.
Anyway, so the first step to sort of the NAC, the neuroassociative conditioning, is decide what to change. So we've already talked about
Mm.
setting that goal. So decide what you want to change, and then get leverage. So he talks a lot about getting leverage by looking at it's either the carrot or the stick, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't talk about it that way. That's the best reference I could find just now off the top of my head. But it's so either being motivated by the worst outcome if you don't do the thing that you're trying to set yourself as a goal, or what's the best outcome. So whatever motivates you. I realize I don't encourage fear as a motivator. It usually causes us to make a lot of bad decisions, but it can be a very powerful one to get you out of the current mindset you're in, or the current state that you're in. So it's either thinking about things, well, if I don't do this, sometimes it's, people have to go to their looking towards their deathbed and go, what am I going to regret when when I'm there, or what kind of things will go wrong if I don't do this? Like, maybe if you have a healthy diet, you need to conjure this idea of being obese, having a heart attack, being unhealthy and not being mobile and doing the things that you're able to do, whatever example you want to come up with, or just maybe it's letting people down, or not being able to give you the kids the things that you want. Like, so it's creating these negative scenarios that are hopefully going to motivate you to do the thing that you're going to do. It's not my favorite way to do it, but for some people, I understand that it can be a motivator. And then, or else imagining how amazing your life could be if you achieve these, this goal or these goals. And so that's when he talks about leverage. That's what that is all about. And then from there, it's the third step is interrupting the limiting behavior. So for me, a lot of times I'll work with people on particular thoughts that come up when they're trying to engage in something, or when they different mental blocks that they have. So I have a method with people where we just kind of change the way of thinking, but it can be anything. It can be it can just be certain associations that we make with the outcome. People have a lot of resistance they'll have negative thinking about money, and that stands in their way of being financially successful. And so breaking that. So as soon as you have that impulse, some people talk about having a rubber band and snapping it. So it's a little jolt of pain that gets them out of that sort of automated behavior that they would be doing, or that thinking that they would be doing, and so on. And then from there, you create new alternatives. So, and BJ Fogg talks about this too. So you replace that behavior that's not getting you to your goal with the new behavior, or the new way of thinking, or the new belief. And then from there, you start to condition, and this is what you referred to before. How do you make it stick? So with enough repeating things for enough time, we talk about how it takes 30 days to change a habit. There are different theories around how long it actually takes, but the conditioning to make sure that it's that it sticks. And then the final step is testing it, testing yourself to see have I completely internalized this habit for myself. So those are the 6 steps to the neuroassociative conditioning, and I think those are really helpful. I've used them in sports, but also on an individual level. I know Tony Robbins has worked with everyone from world leaders to famous actors and athletes. So it's a system that works, and it comes from NLP, and I think it's I don't think people need to try and go through that alone. Find yourself a coach who's familiar with the technique, and if you really want to make change, this is a good one. Or you can just find resources like us online and go through it in more depth. Anyway, so those for individual change, I think that's a really good process. And so even when you're talking about organizationally, if someone's a leader in an organization, individuals create the change, right? So
exactly,
if you can help someone, if this method helps make the change in you to be a better leader, you can really change the organization. So
yeah, I mean those. your behaviors are driving the behaviors of others, like and especially when you're a leader. So that yeah, not to be neglected, that the importance of role modeling when you're driving that change. And I think that's very often when it fails when it comes to change, and where you lose that trustworthiness. If you have a leader that is promoting a kind of change or promoting a set of behaviors but not acting upon them, I mean, immediately you you lose that trust, and nobody's going to follow that your footsteps. Um, One other thought that when that came up when you talked about those steps is the importance of the environmental change. I mean, so setting you up for success. I mean, if it's moving to another city, or moving to a new house, or just refurnishing your office or whatever it is, maybe buying a stand-up desk rather than a sitting desk, these kind of small things. I think that small things like that can have a really big impact. I mean, okay, moving to another city is pretty big, right? But changing your office layout with another kind of chair, or sitting on a gymnastic ball instead of on a chair, or something like that. Those small things can be quite powerful. I just realized some things with I had some back pains, and I was just doing very small adjustments to some of my habits. And this is more about how I run and how I exercise a few things. But very quickly, I saw a sudden change, and a very good result of that. So, it doesn't have to be big, difficult things all the time. Small things can also have a very big impact.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, BJ Fogg, I think Tiny Habits is his book. He talks about small incremental change in order to make the big changes in your life. But I'm glad you brought up that point about your environment, because it just reminded me that one of the best times to change a habit or make any kind of change is when you've change your environment. So if you move into a new house or apartment, that's a great time to add new habits, because you've changed. Well, you've changed your outer world physically, and it opens you up to. But it's also scientifically proven that when you make that kind of a change in your life, those are the optimum windows to actually, now's the time to develop a new habit, to bring something new in your life. So that's a really helpful point. And yeah, bigger. Sometimes for some people, they need that. They need that massive change, and I think that's a big mistake that people make, is they try to have everything happen at once, and then it's not sustainable, and they fall back into. So they just it's. I often talk to people who are looking at, I want to quit my job, and I want to open a cafe, or I want to do, and the thing is, what they're trying to do is they're trying to go from their comfort zone to jump into the deep end of what they're not comfortable with. And then they get there, and they're overwhelmed. They're afraid of failure, and then they go right back, and they go, it wasn't for me. I wasn't up for it. And so I recommend that you go up to the edge of your comfort zone, take a step beyond it, and then see how far you get. But rather than jumping in the deep end, because you're just setting yourself up for success, for failure that way. So yeah, I think the environment one is a big one, and not making the change too big, bigger than you can handle, I think is an important point that you raised there.
Yeah. One more. I'm realizing that I'm realizing a lot of stuff. So, going back to, I started talking about the purpose and the vision, and goal setting as part of this. And I think I've talked about this before, but result goals, learning goals, performance goals, process goals. I mean, breaking up your vision, breaking up your goal setting to, let's take, okay, I want to make more money. So, okay, I want to make $1 million. If that's the result goal, what does your performance need to look like for you to get there? So what is the performance? And that's about your behaviors, right? What do you need to do to get there? And that's very different. And what I find is interesting is sometimes, it can be you might not reach your result, but you might reach your performance goals, and that is very satisfying. Sometimes it's the other way around, that you reach your result goals and not your performance goals, and that's not so satisfying.
So
you
you
know
so you just feel like you got lucky, or
Yeah, a
yeah,
little bit.
okay.
Like imagine if you're playing a game of football and you play really, really crappy, but you win with 2-0. It's like, okay, I'm worried about next game. That kind of thing, right?
Okay.
So result goals, performance goals, but also your process goals. So what kind of processes do you need to set up to get there? And that might be about environmental issues and how you work with others. I mean, soft kind of processes. And then your learning goals. So what do you need to learn to get there? Maybe if we're talking about financial things, maybe I need to learn about the stock market or whatever. So for me, that's a really simple framework that I use a lot to think about different kinds of goals. So it's not just to focus on the result goal, because very often if we just focus on that result goal, it's going to be like what you just described before, that we set up a way too big goal and it's too far of a stretch and we immediately fall back into something else. So that helps. I think that helps me and hopefully others as well to create some
Actually,
sustainability.
yeah, I think that's a good one. I think the process goals make it repeatable, right? So how do you, if you reach the result and you're happy with your performance, but you're not sure how you did it, then how are you going to repeat it for other things? So I think that
Mm,
process goal is a good one. And the learning goal, yeah, absolutely. Through the learning process, I find, as we said, at the beginning, you start to, the more you learn, the more you realize, there's still areas I have more to learn about.
mm.
So not only do your learning goals, um, well, they just help you show you where your blind spots are, where your deficits are, and where you still want to, develop. So no, I think that's a
And
helpful
as
flame
as we
framework.
as we talked about before, when it comes to learning, for some people that's the driver. I have an opportunity to learn stuff,
Hmm.
and just by doing that, you might reach some certain results. For some people are much more result driven, and I don't care how I get there. I just need to get the result, and that's the driver. So
Yeah.
it's especially for team as well. It's great to cover in those boxes to understand how do we need to interact and what do we need to focus on, how do we cooperate, these kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's good. I'm actually gonna incorporate that framework when in at least in a business environment. But I think you could apply that to your personal life as well. The whole results, performance, process, learning, especially
For sure, yeah.
if you're trying to develop something technical. Yeah, no, that's super helpful.
Mm,
Good. So the other as I mentioned, I wanted to talk about BJ Fogg.
mm,
For anyone who's not aware of him, I think he's written a couple of books, including Tiny Habits, but also he's given a couple of good TED talks,
mm,
and he talks about these little changes you make and finding the right triggers. So he's actually got a funny little funny. I don't know if it's funny, but it's a little. It's a good little formula. So it's B equals M plus A plus T, which is behavior equals motivation plus ability plus triggers. And he
mm,
actually has an interesting chart. So on the one axis he's got motivation, the other one he's got ability. So how motivated are you? How much desire do you have to get it? The higher that is, the bigger
mm,
your chance of success. And then how much ability do you have, or how difficult is it going to be for you? So the more ability you have, the less motivation you need. So on the
mm,
one side, you need less motivation. If you have a lot of ability, it's going to be easy for you. And
mm,
then if you don't have a lot of ability yet, but you have a ton of motivation, you're also going to be able to create that change a lot easier. If you have low motivation, low ability, yeah, it's gonna be a lot harder. And then he's
mm,
got this curve in here, and then he talks about the triggers, right? So the things that trigger you to take action. So he talks about when creating change, use existing behaviors to create to trigger the change that you want. And he said, he did a lot of simple little experiments in terms of, changing little eating habits or whatever. But one of the things that always sticks with me is he basically, every time he needed to go to the washroom, he first did, either before or after, he did a couple of push-ups. And so 2 push-ups ended up turning to 4, 5, 10, 20. And so all of a sudden, he's doing 100 push-ups a day by just simply integrating this small change of behavior into something that he's naturally going to do several times a day, right? So I mean, it's not ideal for everyone, because if you might not work in an environment where it's easy just to drop and do push-ups every time. Like when I'm traveling, or if we're giving a workshop, every time I go to the washroom, somebody sees me doing some push-ups. It's not really.
Why not?
I mean, it could be a conversation starter, but the point is, if you can tie something to a behavior that you already do, that's already automated, that you do multiple times a day, and you use that as a trigger to do a new behavior, and you start small enough, you don't go super far out of your comfort zone, you start small enough so that you're able to make those changes incrementally, you're going to have way more success, because your ability is going to grow onto his chart. And I think the more you see success, the more motivated you'll be, right? So your motivation will grow along with your ability, and then you just need the right triggers to maintain that habit. So I find his approach is really helpful. And there's another book that I read, and I'm drawing a blank on the author. It's a similar kind of, it's Atomic Habits. And it all comes back to just starting with these small changes in order to make the bigger changes in your life. So
yeah. Tapping into that, there's something. I mean, we've been there's a book called Switch, I think, and by the Heath brothers, or whatever they call it, and they talk about basically everything that we've been talking about today as well. One thing they also mention is that we haven't mentioned is called Rally the Herds, or Rally the Herd, and it's about creating, or a little bit like the environmental issue, but it's creating a crowd around you that are pushing you in the direction that you want to go. So for instance, one thing that I really want to try to sustain and do more of, actually, and this has been a part of my struggle all my life. I want to get up earlier in the mornings and do sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a neighbor, he's really good at, do you want to get up tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. and go biking with me? And if I just agree to that, it's going to happen. There's no excuse for me, I'm too tired or whatever. If we agree to it, it has to happen. My son plays tennis sometimes early in the mornings. I have to drive him there. If he goes play tennis, I have to go for a run. I have to do something when he's doing it. So I'm putting myself in that situation. And it's like, if you want to read more books, well, okay, join a book circle or something. So you have that social environment of people, like gathering people around you that are creating an atmosphere, an interest, and people to interact with and converse with around these kind of things. So that would be one more point to it, to surround yourself with people who are like-minded and can motivate you and push you into the direction that you want to go.
Yeah, making sure you have the support, right, in order to do it. Yeah. And to the whole thing about having the tiny there's a lot of different habits, like your point about going for a run. It's doing really, I think this is what comes up in Atomic Habits, is where you take that what's the absolute first step you can take. Well, if you're going to go for a run, have your running shoes ready, so that you don't have to take the running shoes out. They're already there. They're a reminder, so they're a trigger for you. They're ready for you to put on, and so it's that first step already taken for you, because a lot of things in making change, it's just getting started, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really important one. And I was looking. I was trying to remember the title of the book from Charles Duhigg. And I looked into my audiobook, so it automatically started playing. So that's why didn't want to be distracted there. There was a little audio in the background.
I thought I heard
Yeah.
something.
But yeah, it's The Power of Habit. I didn't
Yeah.
want to misquote his book, but that's a book for anyone listening that I really highly recommend.
Mm.
The Power of Habit, because this is where this is how you make sustainable change, right? You create a habit out of it.
Mm.
And so if you want to have lasting change until it becomes habitual, it's easy to make short-term change. I mean, if I go to a yoga retreat, it's really easy for me to do yoga twice a day, right?
Yeah.
And then I come back in my daily life, and I'll find excuses, or I'll just be busy. I'll have to get up early to travel, and I can't fit it in the morning, and then I can't. It's not convenient to take my yoga mat with me everywhere. I do have a yoga towel that I take from my hotel room, but it's just these things. So so there you go. I've incorporated something that makes it easier not to find the resistance, but until you make it a habit for yourself, it's really hard to make that change lasting. So, so again, Charles Duhigg, really great book, Power of Habit. Any other good resources? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, one more thought that I personally, this is more of a personal reflection, I guess, but not commit to 100%, and that might sound counterproductive. That you have to go all in. What I'm saying is to be a bit forgiving to yourself, because if sometimes there are circumstances and you can't make it, don't be too hard on yourself and think, oh, okay, now I can't do it, and then you kind of fail. So it doesn't have to be 100%. I mean, if we continue with that part of getting up in the morning and going for a run, if that's your goal and you want to do that 5 times a week, if it's one day a week where you're feeling I can't do it today, maybe just let it be. But if you instead celebrate that you made it 4 times or 3 times even, then that's pushing you in the right direction, and just keeping with it, that will drive a positive behavior anyway. But not seeing that I didn't do it one time as a failure. It might be we have bump in the roads, but just don't fall back into those. Just not being too hard on yourself. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I've realized when I make a very strict schedule for my workout or whatever, and I stick with that too hard, and something unforeseeable happens with family needs or something, I have a conflict immediately, right? So, and then I need to prioritize. What is more important? And if I prioritize working out before my family, that's not going to end well.
No, I think that's a good reason to track your progress, because just because you like I said, you don't want to make your goals too hard. So if it's just a grind to try and do it on a regular basis, then you've set your goals too high. But also, if you miss once, or I mean, it's not a good habit to miss the things you set out to do. But the more you can look at your successes rather than your failures is important, and also to look at it over a period of time. Right? If you get discouraged because you have a bad week, then that's not going to be healthy for you. But if you look at, but I had 3 really good weeks before that, then that can help you continue to go. And if you can get someone to help you measure, or if you're objective enough to measure yourself, it's just really good to track your progress. That's super motivating, but also to recognize how far you've come. When I do individual coaching, I usually start with a wheel of life. So it's a good way to kind of go, okay, this is the state of my life right now, and to measure it. And then I always they take a copy with them, and I always recommend in 3 months, look at this again and see what's changed, see what's improved. Look at it again in a year, right? So I think if you can find a way to measure yourself in the things that you want to change, just to recognize that over time you will improve. Just like investing in the stock market, don't do it for the short-term gains. You'll lose. It's more gambling. But if you look at it over a 10-year period, you're gonna win. And if you invest in yourself over a long period, you're always gonna win.
Yeah.
That feels like a good place to wrap it up.
I was just gonna say that feels like okay. Sustainability long term. Yeah, I like it. It's a good ending point of today's conversation.
Great. So thanks for everyone for listening. If I hope this was helpful. It's always helpful for me and just to talk about these things and to hear your points, Toby. And I think this is a really important topic that people, come for coaching for, or are struggling with, trying to create change in their lives, and it discourages them when they can't. So don't try and do it alone. There's lots of support and resources out there. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm at peterteuscher.com. Toby's available through his LinkedIn website, his LinkedIn page. So feel free to reach out. Give us your comments, add any questions. We're happy to share whatever knowledge we have through this way, or through an email. So with that, I've got another appointment here, so I'm gonna wrap it up now. And thanks again, Toby, for another great conversation.
Thanks, Peter.
We'll do another one in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we will. I'll think of a good topic.
Okay, look forward to it. Thanks, Toby.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.